We're going to be setting up our very first model in the WFLY ET16 Pro, and we're going to be setting up the QF009 SU35. It has a BIMD gyro in it, so it does automatic mixing inside the gyro. So we're going to set it up as a traditional plane in the transmitter. I'm going to select model number 2. We're going to rename it. We're going to rename it SU35 number 2, since I've already set one up. Okay, and then we're going to select that model.
Throttle touch off.
And you can see down here it shows SU35 number 2 is what we have selected. Alright, so let's go back into our menu system. I'm going to go into our general menu, and we want to go into function, and we want to make sure that we've got our SG switch set up for channel 5, which is gear. So if I move the switches on SG, we can see that they're reading it. So we want that set up for our mode switch, for our 3 modes, for stabilized mode, gyro mode, which is just wind mitigation, and then also full manual mode. Alright, so I've got a cheat sheet here from where I've already had this plane set up in another transmitter. So I want to set up a timer, and I want to set my timer for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and I want it to give me an alarm about 15 seconds before the timer expires. And I want it to count up, and I want it to vibrate, and I'll go with vibrate 1, and my reset switch I want set for SH, my momentary switch. So I'm going to have that as my reset switch. So when it's forward, it should be on. Okay, I believe that's the way we want it to work. Okay, so go back to timer. Our start, I want my throttle to be the start. Okay, so whenever I have positive throttle, so I want that to be J3, and which is my throttle. If you look at the diagram, it'll show you how everything is labeled. So you got J1, J2 is your aileron and elevator, J3, J4 is your throttle and your rudder, and J3 is listed as throttle. So I'm going to select J3, and then I'm going to select position, and so I want the timer to engage when I'm above about 15 to 20% throttle. So let me bring my throttle up to about 10 or 15%. You can see the hash marks here. It's 25, 50, 75, 100. So I want to get about halfway, a little less than halfway between 0 and 25, because the motor typically isn't going to start spinning until you get about 12%, 15% throttle in normal most cases. So I'm going to set that, and then I'm going to reverse it because I want it to start the throttle when I'm above that. So anytime that the throttle is in that green area, it's going to start my timer. Okay. Okay, so now we want to go into our stop function that we want to use for stopping the timer, and once again I am going to use J3, which is the throttle. I go into position, and then basically I want it below where we set it before, so below somewhere around 12 to 15% of the throttle. So I'm going to set it there, and it will stop the timer when it is in the green, right? So that's what we want. So we want one that starts it in the green, one that stops it in the green. Okay, so now let's see if we go into reset our timer. Okay, so now if I bring my throttle up, it should start it, and I put it down and it stops it. So we've got our timer set up. Let's go back into our general menu again, and let's look at dual rate. And my cheat sheet says my dual rate for aileron should be 70%. go to page 2 and it'll show you what channel you're on. Go back to page 1. And so we want to set our dual rate on the high end and the low end of the stick, you know, positive and negative at 70%. So I'm going to hold this down, get it down to around 70%, and rate B 70%. And then my expo I want set at 60% for A and B. All right, now if we go to our next channel, we want to set expo and dual rate on is our elevator. So I'm going to switch to elevator, go back, and my elevator is 100% dual rate on both, and then 55% on my dual rate. So let's go up to 55% on both. And there, now you can see our exponential wave there in the graph. All right, so we've got our dual rate and expo set up on the aileron and elevator. So I'm going to go back to the general menu here. Let me see. No, I want to go back and so now I want to go into my sub trim, and my sub trim from my aileron, I had to have that set at -14 in the other transmitter, so I am going to set that for -14. So that should be good for that. Now the last thing we want to do before we bind up to our model, and I want to set everything up that I need in the model before I bind to it, so I know it's not going to do something weird, right? I'll make sure that everything is set up. We want to set up a failsafe. We want to check our failsafe. So everything is at 0, which is where it should be at the midpoint, except for the throttle, and the throttle is at -100. That's the way it should be, but always check the failsafe settings and make sure. Okay, so now let's go back to the model menu, and we want to look at our throttle safety switch. We want to set up a throttle safety switch. So we go into throttle hold, and we want to make this, we want that active. But I'm going to set up my switch, and the switch I want for my throttle safety switch is SF, Sierra Foxtrot. So I'm going to set that, and I'm going to set the position. And I want my throttle safety switch on when it's in the default position, when the switch is back, and when it's forward, I want the throttle safety switch off. Okay, so that's the way I think we need to have it. Oh, let me make it active. Oh, throttle hold position at 0. All right, let's go to our monitor. So now the throttle is not active.
Throttle hold off.
When I take off my throttle safety switch, it is active. -100 plus 100.
Throttle hold on.
All right, I think that's going to work great. So at this point in time, we've done everything I think that we need to do. I think the only thing that we have left to do now is to bind up to it, make sure everything is working, make sure that our gyro modes are working. As a matter of fact, we go back into our monitor and make sure that we're getting everything. Elevator, aileron, looks good. Rudder,
Throttle hold off.
throttle,
Throttle hold on.
and then channel 5 is our switch for our flight modes and gyro modes, and it's reading everything correctly there. Okay, so I think we're good. Now I think we can go ahead and bind up to our plane and test, make sure the gyro modes are working, test failsafe, make sure that's working, and then we'll be ready for our first flight. Okay, now we're ready to bind up to our plane. So I'm going to go into the link settings, and I'm going to go into link, and it's set for internal RF, enter ELRS. So I'm going to set that for the normal RF chipset for the WFLY receiver. You want to start your transmitter in bind mode first before you power up the WFLY RF201S receiver, because it will try to bind to the transmitter that is currently in bind mode when it is first powered up. So let's go ahead and start our bind here, and then we're going to power on our plane and our receiver, and it's already bound up. You could hear the ESC initializing, so that's good to go. Okay, so we'll go back to our main menu here, and it's showing full bars on our receiver because we're real close to it. Alright, so if I give it right aileron, the right aileron comes up, left goes down. If I give it left aileron, left comes up, right goes down. If I get an elevator, they're coming up in the proper direction. Down elevator, they're all coming in the right direction. Okay, so I should be in fully stabilized mode. So if I move the plane around, alright, it's correcting in the proper direction. And then if I put it into the center mode, that should be gyro mode or wind mitigation mode. Okay, and so they're only moving when I jostle the plane around. And then full manual mode, I shouldn't get any, and I'm not. Alright, so now we want to take off our throttle safety switch
Throttle hold on.
and test our throttle. Okay, that's working. Alright, so I want to give it a little bit of throttle. Alright, and some aileron and elevator, and I want to shut off the transmitter. Okay, so the control surfaces went back to neutral and the motor shut off. Our failsafe is working. Everything is working as it should. Alright, we are ready to launch this, so stay tuned. In the next video, we'll be taking this SU-35 out and flying it with the WFLY ET16 Pro. Everything is working. Alright, that's a wrap on this episode.